Have you ever felt trapped in a world where people seem more interested in what you have than who you truly are? Imagine being a millionaire, surrounded by luxury but also by deceit, like Lorena, who grew tired of being surrounded by people only interested in her fortune. In search of authenticity and genuine connection, she makes the drastic decision to pretend she is poor and moves to a distant town. But when her past begins to infiltrate her new life, Lorena realizes that the struggle for a new identity is just the beginning. Join us on this thrilling journey of self-discovery and redemption, where true value lies in genuine relationships and love, not in material possessions. What will she do when the truth threatens to unravel everything she has built? The answer may surprise you. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to join the channel for more stories like this. Lorena, a 42-year-old woman, seemed to have everything anyone could dream of. Her life was marked by the dazzling shine of expensive jewelry, stunning parties, and trips to places that many only knew through magazines. As the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country, she lived in an immense mansion, surrounded by impeccably maintained gardens and luxury cars parked in the driveway. It was hard not to notice her presence at any gala event, with her exclusive dresses and her discreet smile, always elegant. But behind all this grandeur was a much harsher reality. At those parties where champagne flowed endlessly and music played until the early hours of the morning, Lorena felt, ironically, more alone than ever. She smiled at the guests, listened to conversations about business and investments, but deep down, she knew that what most people wanted was not her company or genuine friendship. They wanted what she represented, power and wealth. The emptiness she felt grew with each passing day. The people around her seemed to wear masks, smiling and complimenting her. But she noticed how their gazes changed when they spoke of her possessions, the luxuries that only she could provide. Friends who promised loyalty quickly disappeared when there were no more benefits involved. And romantic relationships, those were even more painful. Charming, confident men came and went from her life, but always with their eyes fixed on her wealth. They all promised to love her, but as soon as they realized she was not just the generous millionaire they imagined, they distanced themselves, leaving her more hurt than before. One night, during yet another gala at her mansion, Lorena observed the people around her. It was her birthday, but she felt that no one there truly knew or cared about her. There were toasts and laughter, but nothing was genuine. Her closest friends were too busy talking about their own business projects or discussing where they would spend their next luxury vacation. They didn't even care to ask how she was, whether she was happy, or what truly made her smile. It was then that an uncomfortable feeling took hold of her. The atmosphere felt suffocating, the music too loud, the lights blinding. She felt the weight of superficiality around her, as if she were trapped in a gilded cage. With a heavy heart, Lorena retreated to a quieter corner of her immense garden. The cool night air brushed against her skin, and there, alone among the roses she loved so much but rarely had time to appreciate, tears began to roll silently down her face. "What am I doing here?" she thought. "Why does everyone see me only as a walking wallet?" In that moment, Lorena realized something important. The people around her didn't see her as Lorena, the woman, but as Lorena, the millionaire. All she wanted was to be loved and respected for who she was, not for what she had. But how could she do that when the shine of her fortune always overshadowed who she truly was inside? The desire for something more, for a life with meaning, began to take shape in her heart. She wanted to live in a place where no one knew who she was, where she could start anew, without the expectations her wealth imposed on her. It was time for a change, a drastic but necessary change. What she still didn't know was that this decision would lead her down a path much deeper than she ever imagined. Lorena was sitting in front of the panoramic window of her room, watching the horizon. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but for her the beauty of that scene felt distant, almost untouchable. In recent days her mind had been enveloped in a heavy fog, caused by the latest disappointment she faced. Once again, someone she thought was getting close to her for who she was revealed himself to be interested only in her money. It all started innocently. Lorena had met Raphael at an art exhibition. He was charming, had a strong presence, and a way of talking that made her laugh like she hadn't in a long time. For months they shared intimate dinners, leisurely strolls around the city, and he always seemed interested in hearing her thoughts and ideas. For a brief moment, She allowed herself to believe that she had finally found someone who saw her beyond her fortune. But as always, the truth surfaced in a bitter way. During a casual conversation, Raphael mentioned million-dollar investments and made it clear, in his subtle hints, that he expected her to fund a risky project he was proposing. It was subtle, but Lorena, already weary of betrayals disguised as affection, realized what lay behind that request. He didn't just want to be with her. He wanted access to her money, her influence. Everything he pretended not to care about at the beginning was, deep down, the true objective. When Lorena confronted him, the atmosphere between them changed drastically. Raphael tried to argue, saying it was natural for someone like her to invest in something so promising. But Lorena felt her heart tighten. His words were no different from so many others. He didn't care about her feelings, her fears, or her hopes. He saw only numbers and opportunities. After that night, Lorena ended the relationship and closed herself off. The pain of this disappointment wasn't just about Raphael. It was the weight of all the betrayals she had accumulated. Throughout her life, she had always felt that what she offered most dearly, her heart, her essence, was never enough. People approached her with smiles and kindness, but in the end, the shine of her fortune always spoke louder. In that profound loneliness, Lorena began to question everything. What did I do wrong? She thought. Why can't anyone see me beyond the money? Each time she became involved with someone, her hope was renewed, and each time she was betrayed, a part of her died a little more. Now it seemed she was completely exhausted. Even surrounded by riches and living a privileged life that many would envy, the truth was that her heart was empty, lacking deep roots of genuine affection. She spent days locked away in her mansion, avoiding the parties and events that once filled her time. Everything that had once made sense, the luxurious trips, the designer clothes, the superficial conversations, now seemed insignificant. Money had never been a problem for her. But for the first time in her life, Lorena realized it had become the greatest obstacle to finding something that truly mattered: genuine love and true friendship. One morning, while walking through the gardens of her estate, something inside her finally broke. She looked at the vast green expanse, the marble fountains, the costly sculptures scattered along the path, and all she felt was a deep emptiness. None of this fills what is missing inside me. The truth was painful, but she knew what she had to do. It was no longer worth trying to change the people around her, trying to prove she was more than just a wealthy heiress. The problem wasn't with others. It was with the environment in which she lived. It was that lifestyle that constantly attracted people with selfish interests. From that moment on, Lorena decided that a radical change was necessary. She no longer wanted to live in a bubble of wealth, where everyone saw her as a walking opportunity. She needed to get out, step away, and start anew. And for that, she would have to let go of everything that tied her to that suffocating identity. She would cease to be Lorena, the millionaire, and become someone else. Someone people would know without any preconceived notions. Someone who could be loved for who she truly was, not for what she possessed. But what would this new beginning look like? How could she leave behind everything she had known until now? As these thoughts echoed in her mind, Lorena knew there was no turning back. She had to try something different, something that would make her feel alive again. The first step of this new journey was about to be taken, and she had no idea how much this decision would change her life forever. After days of reflecting on her life and the disappointment she had faced, Lorena decided that the only way to discover who she truly was would be to leave everything behind. She no longer wanted to be seen as a millionaire surrounded by outside interests. She needed a fresh start in a place where no one knew her name or her fortune. Determined to start over, she sought out her trusted lawyer Marcelo, a man she had known for years who had always been discreet and loyal. Together, they devised a carefully thought-out plan. Lorena would begin selling off some of her most visible assets: the yacht, the haute couture jewelry, and part of her art collection. It wouldn't be an abrupt process that drew attention, but enough for her to distance herself without leaving a trace. The remainder of her fortune would be kept in discreet investments, accessible only for emergencies. "Are you sure this is what you want, Lorena?" Marcelo asked, his voice heavy with concern. He knew her well enough to understand that she wasn't just running away, but seeking something deeper, something even money couldn't buy. She took a deep breath before responding. "Yes, Marcelo. For the first time in my life, I want to know who I am without all of this." I want to see if someone can like me. The real me. Marcelo nodded. He knew it wouldn't help to try to dissuade her, and he respected her too much to interfere. They continued discussing the practical details. Lorena would need a new identity, something simple and discreet, and thus Laura was born. A woman without great riches, without the powerful surname that opened doors, but with a heart full of hope and determination. Choosing a small, distant town was a challenge. Lorena sought a place that was as different from her current life as possible. After several weeks of research, she found a small coastal town, peaceful and welcoming, where the pace of life was completely different from the frantic world she was accustomed to. The cobblestone streets and simple houses by the sea had a unique charm that immediately attracted her. There she could blend in with the locals and live in a way she had never experienced before. When she arrived in the town, everything felt like a distant dream. The quiet streets, the smell of the sea in the air, the gentle sound of waves crashing on the shore. It was hard to believe that, just days before, she had been in meetings with investors and mingling at glamorous events. Now, with a simple suitcase in hand and a worn coat, she was no longer Lorena, the millionaire. She was just Laura. Her first step was to rent a simple little house, almost forgotten on a quiet street. The house was small, with white-painted wooden walls and a small, unkempt garden. For most, it might have seemed a modest place, but for Laura it was exactly what she needed. There were no luxuries, but there was a sense of freedom, as if every corner of the house offered her the chance to breathe again. The next challenge was finding a job. For someone who had never needed to work a day in her life, this was a completely new experience. Laura found herself walking through the town streets, chatting with small business owners, all friendly and curious about the new woman who had arrived. It was at a grocery store, a simple family-run shop, that she found her new occupation. The owner, a gray-haired gentleman named Ernesto, hired her to work at the counter, serving the local residents. The job, which seemed so simple to others, became a true lesson for Laura. At first, she didn't know exactly how to handle customers or perform everyday tasks, like organizing shelves or giving the correct change. But little by little, she learned. The routine of work, the genuine smiles from the people who came to buy fruits or ask for advice. Everything began to bring a lightness that Lorena had never experienced before. More than that, she began to form bonds. The trivial conversations at the grocery store counter soon turned into genuine connections. The townspeople were curious but also warm. They accepted her for who she presented herself to be, never asking about her past or suspecting the true identity she carried. There, for the first time in a long while, Laura began to feel like she belonged somewhere. And it was in this new reality that she met Tiago. He was a local mechanic with an easy smile and an unpretentious demeanor. His dark hair was always slightly messy, and his hands, marked by hard work, carried a sincerity she had rarely encountered in her previous life. Tiago frequented the grocery store to fix Ernesto's old truck, and soon they began chatting. At first they exchanged only quick words, a comment about the weather, a joke about work. But over time those conversations transformed into something more. Tiago didn't seem interested in impressing her. He didn't ask invasive questions or show curiosity about who she was, or where she came from. To him, Laura was just another person living her life. And in a way, that was what made her feel so drawn to him. With Tiago, she didn't have to pretend. She didn't have to hide her insecurities. He saw her in a way that no one else did. But as time passed and the bonds in the town grew stronger, Lorena knew her secret continued to weigh heavily on her. The more she became attached to this new life, the harder it would be to maintain appearances. And one day the truth would come to light. Upon arriving in the small coastal town, Lorena, now known as Laura, immediately felt the impact of the change. The smell of the sea was stronger than any expensive perfume she had used. The sound of the waves and the cries of seagulls felt much more real than the constant buzz of glamorous events and business meetings that had once filled her days. Everything there was different, simpler, quieter. And at the same time, everything was a new and unknown challenge. The first major change was her new home. Instead of the mansion filled with empty rooms and endless hallways, she now lived in a small wooden house with a weathered tile roof and a garden that grew haphazardly. The place was modest but cozy. The living room had only a worn sofa and a wooden table. The walls were peeling in some spots, and the windows creaked when the wind blew. Despite the simplicity, That space offered something her old home could never provide: peace. It was her refuge, far from appearances and expectations. Lorena, or rather Laura, began to realize that the simple life also came with its difficulties. Accustomed to having everything at the touch of a button or a phone call, she found herself dealing with mundane problems she had never faced before. Cooking was a task she had never mastered, and more than once, she found herself struggling with recipes that seemed easy on paper but ended up as burned or tasteless dishes. Hand-washing clothes was another shock. The old washing machine in the house didn't work well, so Laura began using the tub in the backyard, scrubbing clothes with a strength she never thought she would have to use. These small frustrations, however, were overshadowed by what Laura was learning about herself. Each day was a lesson in humility and rediscovery. She began to realize that even without all the luxury, there was something valuable in the freedom she had there. She no longer had to worry about appearances, about critical gazes or social expectations. In that quiet town, no one knew who she was, and no one seemed to care. This was liberating in a way she could never have imagined. However, the biggest challenge came with her job. Being a clerk in a grocery store was something that had never been in her life plans, but it was exactly what she found when she started working for Ernesto. The grocery store was small, with wooden shelves stocked with basic goods and an old scale at the counter. First, Laura felt out of place. She didn't understand how to weigh fruits or slice deli meats accurately, and she often fumbled with the cash register, causing knowing laughs from the older customers. She, who had always been surrounded by spreadsheets and million-dollar contracts, was now dealing with coins and paper bags. But little by little, she began to adapt. The townspeople, simple folks with gentle voices, welcomed her with a kindness she had never experienced in the luxury world she once inhabited. Mrs. Maria, a white-haired lady with a generous smile, often stopped by the grocery store and made a point to chat with Laura. She talked about her grandchildren, the recipes she was preparing, and sometimes even brought a piece of cake for Laura to taste. Mr. Joao, the fisherman, had a habit of coming in every day to buy bread and share stories about the sea, tales that made Laura laugh and enchanted her with the simplicity of coastal life. It was this camaraderie that began to transform something within Laura. She started to notice a joy in living that she had never found at lavish parties or in the mansions she used to frequent. The people there seemed happier, more connected to one another. No one was trying to impress anyone. No one wanted anything in return except for a genuine smile and a good conversation. And this was something new for her. On her days off, Laura began to explore the town. She walked along the beach at dawn, feeling the cool sand beneath her feet, something she had never done before. She watched fishermen casting their nets into the sea with an almost poetic rhythm, and inhaled the scent of salt and fresh fish filling the air. Gradually, the colors of the town, the sound of children laughing as they ran through the streets, all of it began to weave into her new reality. Amidst this adaptation, Laura began to notice something surprising. She was rediscovering herself. Far from the pressure of maintaining a perfect image, she could simply be herself. There were no more masks, just the simplicity of her new life. It didn't matter that her hair wasn't perfectly styled or that her clothes were simpler than anything she had worn before. What mattered was that she was starting to feel genuine happiness, one that didn't depend on money or status. This new reality brought with it a tranquility she had never experienced before. Sitting on the porch of her small house, watching the sun set over the horizon of the sea, Laura felt something deep growing inside her. A sense of belonging, as if, for the first time, she was exactly where she was meant to be. But even amidst this contentment, a part of her knew that this simple new life couldn't last forever. She was there as Laura, an ordinary woman, but her true identity, Lorena, still existed. And the more she engaged with the townspeople, the harder it would be to hide who she really was. With each passing day, the weight of this secret grew, and Laura knew that eventually, the truth would have to come to light. What she didn't yet realize was the impact that this revelation would have on those beginning to become part of her life, and on herself. As the days turned into weeks, Lorena, or Laura as everyone now knew her, began to notice something she had never experienced before. For the first time, she was forming genuine bonds with the people around her. There were no pretenses, no hidden agendas. There, in the heart of that small coastal town, the residents didn't care what she wore or how much money she had. They saw her as an equal, a simple woman living her life just like anyone else. Gradually, Laura started to feel more comfortable, not just with her modest life but also with the people who had become part of her routine. Conversations at the grocery store with Mrs. Maria, who always appeared with her affectionate smile and family stories, brought a joy that she had never felt in the superficial conversations at the lavish parties she attended. Mr. Joao, the fisherman, made it a point to bring her the freshest fish every week, as if that simple gesture was a way to show respect and affection. But it was Tiago who stirred her in a way that no one else had. Tiago was different. With his calm and honest demeanor, he seemed unaffected by life's small worries. He had an easy smile, the kind that makes anyone relax, and his brown eyes sparkled with a genuine warmth that reflected how much he enjoyed being present, living in the moment. He was the town mechanic, known for fixing anything with an engine, and everyone trusted his work. Despite being a simple man, there was something in his essence that drew Laura in. Perhaps it was the fact that he never seemed impressed by what she did or said, never seeking anything beyond a sincere conversation. At first, their interactions were brief. Tiago would come into the grocery store to buy some tools or grab a quick snack, and they would exchange a few words, always accompanied by a smile. But over time, those casual conversations began to stretch longer. He would ask how work was going. She would answer and suddenly find herself sharing little moments from her day. With Tiago, there were no judgments, no need to hide who she was. She could simply be Laura, and he seemed to appreciate that. On a particularly sunny day, Tiago invited her for a walk. "Shall we stroll along the beach after work?" he asked, so naturally that it left her momentarily speechless. Laura hesitated. It had been so long since anyone had invited her to something simple, with no ulterior motives, that she didn't know how to respond. But looking into Tiago's eyes, she realized he expected nothing in return except for her company. "Sure, why not?" she replied, her smile starting timid but quickly turning genuine. That walk changed something inside her. They strolled along the beach side by side, their feet sinking into the soft sand, and the sea breeze caressing their faces. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. As they walked, Tiago began to share stories about his life, how he had grown up in the town, learned the mechanic trade from his father, and how he appreciated the simple things in life. He wasn't a man of great material ambitions but rather had a deeper ambition: to live peacefully, surrounded by the people he loved. Laura listened in silence, fascinated by the way Tiago viewed the world. For him, happiness wasn't found in what could be bought but in the small things that many overlooked. The sunlight reflecting off the water, the laughter of a child running on the beach, the smell of fresh bread coming out of the oven. She who had spent her whole life chasing recognition, status, and financial success, began to wonder if she had been blind all this time. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tiago turned to her, and their eyes met in a way that made Laura's heart race. There was no need for words. The silence between them was comfortable, as if they both understood what the other was feeling. And in that simple, unpretentious moment she wondered, had she finally found someone who saw her for who she really was? Someone who, unlike all the other people in her life, wasn't interested in her money or her last name. The following days confirmed her suspicion. Tiago continued to seek her out, always wearing the same calm smile and carrying the same easygoing attitude. They began to spend more time together, exploring the town, chatting about everything and nothing, sharing moments that, for Laura, became precious. And with each passing day, she felt her heart open up more to him. However, even amidst the happiness that was starting to bloom, a shadow lingered over her thoughts. Tiago knew her as Laura, the simple woman who worked at the grocery store and lived in a modest little house. But what if he discovered the truth? What if he found out that she was Lorena, a millionaire who had escaped her former life? Would he love her the same way, or would he also be consumed by the temptation that money brings? This doubt began to gnaw at her, even when Tiago made everything seem so easy. With each smile he gave her, each sweet word he whispered, she wondered how long she had before her secret became unsustainable. Everything seemed to be going well for Lorena. As Laura, she finally felt the peace of a simple life, surrounded by people who didn't care about her past or her fortune. She had built something real, something that for the first time wasn't based on her wealth. Yet, just like the gentle waves of the sea breaking on the shore, her past was about to return with force, threatening to destroy everything. The calm of the coastal town was shattered by unexpected news. An investigative journalist, Pedro, had arrived in the town. At first, he didn't draw much attention, just another passing visitor, curious about the quiet life everyone led. But unbeknownst to Lorena, Pedro was there with a specific goal: to uncover the truth behind the mysterious woman who had suddenly appeared in town, without a past or a history. He had begun his investigation months earlier in his hometown, listening to rumors and clues that led him to suspect that Laura and Lorena were the same person. One day, while Laura was working at the grocery store, Pedro came in to buy some items. He watched her closely, analyzing her gestures, her manner of speaking. Something didn't add up for him. Why would someone with such elegance and sophisticated features live in such a simple town and work at a grocery store? As he left the shop with a serious expression, Pedro began to piece together the puzzle. He knew he was close to a major story. It didn't take long for him to find the evidence he was seeking. An old photo of Lorena, taken at a gala event years before, appeared in his research. Even disguised as Laura, it was impossible to deny that it was the same woman. The shock Pedro felt upon confirming the truth was immediate. A millionaire in disguise, living as a simple woman in a small town? That was gold for a journalist like him. The story had the potential to explode in the headlines. However, Pedro decided not to act immediately. He knew he held the power in his hands, but he also understood that exposing Lorena would cause a whirlwind in her life, and perhaps in the lives of many others. Instead of publishing the article, he chose to confront her first, curious about the reason behind this charade. After all, why would a woman like her abandon everything to live so modestly? When he finally approached Lorena, she was sitting on her porch watching the sunset, as she often did at the end of each day. Pedro approached calmly, and with a serious but not hostile expression, revealed what he had discovered. His words fell like a stone on Lorena's chest. "I know who you are," he said bluntly. "You are Lorena the millionaire. And if I wanted to, tomorrow the whole world would know about it." Lorena's blood ran cold. Her worst fear was coming true. For months, she had lived in the tranquility of her new identity, but now the past was catching up to her. Her hands trembled and her heart raced. She knew she was at a crossroads: reveal the truth and risk losing everything she had built in her new life, or continue to hide who she was, hoping Pedro would change his mind, or that it wouldn't be too late when the truth finally came to light. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure, but her voice trembled. Pedro, crossing his arms, watched her for a few moments before responding. "Because people have the right to know. A story like yours can't be hidden forever. But I'm here to hear your side. I want to understand." With her eyes fixed on the horizon, Lorena felt tears forming. For months, she had managed to live as an ordinary person, free from the weight of expectations and the deceit that money attracted. Now all that peace was hanging by a thread. In silence, she began to share her story with Pedro. She explained the reason for her escape, her exhaustion from always being surrounded by people who saw her as nothing more than a walking bank. She spoke of her disappointments, the betrayals, and how she just wanted to find a place where she could be herself. Pedro listened in silence, but his expression didn't change. He was a journalist and the truth was his main mission. At the end of Lorena's account, he sighed. "I understand what you're saying, but the truth always comes to light, Lorena. And when that happens, it might be far worse than if you decide to tell it yourself." Those words echoed in Lorena's mind for the following days. The pressure of keeping the secret felt like a weight on her shoulders, and she began to question whether she was willing to carry it for much longer. On one side was the happiness she had built as Laura, true friendships, a blossoming love with Tiago, and the peace she so desperately desired. On the other was the constant threat of being unmasked in a humiliating way, and watching everything she had built come crashing down. Each passing day, Lorena lived with the tension that at any moment, her new life could end. Pedro's words, "The truth always comes to light," served as a constant reminder that she couldn't run from her past forever. But she also knew that if she made the decision to tell the truth herself, she would have control over what would come next. And so, between fear and hope, Lorena prepared for what lay ahead. She knew she was facing the hardest decision of her life. The night was cold, and the wind carried the scent of the sea. Lorena knew this would be one of the most difficult moments of her life. Since Pedro the journalist had discovered her true identity, she hadn't been able to sleep peacefully. The weight of living a lie suffocated her, and with each passing day, her fear of losing Tiago grew. She needed to tell the truth before the world did it for her. Tiago was the first man who truly saw her, without the shadow of her fortune. With him, Lorena could simply be Laura, a common woman full of dreams and fears, without the mask she had worn for so many years. But now, faced with the imminent threat of exposure, she could no longer keep the secret. That night, she invited him to her small house, where they had shared so many happy moments. Sitting at the table, with only the sound of the waves breaking in the distance, Tiago sensed that something was wrong. Lorena's eyes were sadder than ever, and the silence that fell between them felt heavier than usual. "Tiago, I need to tell you something," she began, her voice almost faltering. He looked at her attentively, concerned but calm. "You're scaring me, Laura. What's happening?" Lorena's heart raced. She knew there was no turning back now, and with a long sigh, she began to reveal the truth. "My name isn't Laura. I'm not who you think I am. I am Lorena." She paused for a moment, waiting for Tiago's reaction, but he remained silent, confused. "Lorena?" he repeated, not understanding the weight of that name. "Yes, Lorena Vasquez. The heiress of the Vasquez fortune." Those words echoed in the small room like a bomb. Tiago froze, unable to process the revelation. He had known her as a simple, honest woman who had appeared in town without a past, but now he found himself facing a completely different truth. She continued, her voice trembling. "I ran away from my life of luxury. I was tired of being surrounded by people who only cared about my money. I came here because I wanted to know if someone could like me for who I really am. And I found you, Tiago. You were the first person who saw me without the weight of my fortune. And I fell in love with you." Tears began to roll down Lorena's face. She knew this revelation could destroy everything she had built with him. Tiago remained silent. The confusion in his eyes was evident. He slowly stood up, walked to the window and looked outside, trying to process what he had just heard. Lorena, anxious, watched every movement, her heart tightening, afraid of what he would say. The silence between them was unbearable. "You deceived me, Laura? Or should I say Lorena?" he asked, his voice serious, not lifting his gaze. "Was all of this a lie? Who are you really?" "No, Tiago, the person you met is me. Everything we lived was real. I only hid my past because I was afraid of losing this, of losing you." He looked at her, his eyes filled with questions and hurt. "Do you think I would care about your money? That I'm like the others you've known?" "No, I know you wouldn't. That's why I'm telling you now. Because you are the only person I trust. But I was afraid I would lose you if you knew the truth." Lorena trembled. The silence that followed was worse than any words Tiago could have spoken. Finally, he sighed and sat back down. "I need time to understand all of this. It's not something I can just accept right away." Those words cut Lorena like a blade. She knew he was being honest, but it still hurt. "I understand," she replied, trying to stay calm. But inside, all she wanted was to run to him, hug him, and beg him not to leave her. Tiago looked at her once more, his expression soft yet distant. "You should have trusted me from the beginning. But now I need to think." He stood up, grabbed his keys, and without saying anything more, left through the door. The sound of the door closing echoed throughout the house, and Lorena stood there, alone with the deafening silence. She felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. The man she loved, the only person she truly felt connected to, had walked away, and she didn't know if he would return. That night, Lorena lay awake. The weight of the decision to tell Tiago the truth was heavier than she had imagined. She wondered if she had done the right thing or if, once again, her past had ruined her future. She feared she might never see the man who made her believe it was possible to be loved for who she was, not for what she owned. The hours passed slowly, and with the rising sun, her uncertainty about what the future held only grew. After days of silence and reflection, Tiago finally returned. The sun was beginning to set when Lorena heard a gentle knock at the door. Her heart raced, and she hesitated for a moment before opening it. There he was, with a calm yet determined expression. The last few days had been pure anguish for her, but at that moment, there was something different in his demeanor. Tiago took a deep breath, and with a simple gesture of opening his arms, he indicated that he was no longer coming with judgments or uncertainties. He came with a decision. "I've thought a lot about all of this, Lorena," he said calmly, using her true name for the first time since the revelation. "About you, about us, and about what all of this means." Lorena felt the weight of those words, as if the future of both of them depended on her response. "I never wanted to deceive you, Tiago. I just wanted a chance to be myself, away from the shadow of my past." He nodded, understanding the pain she carried. "I know. And the woman I met here in this town, that is the real Lorena. The money, the titles, none of that matters to me. I love you for who you are." Those words brought tears to Lorena's eyes. For the first time in her life, someone saw beyond her fortune, beyond her last name. Tiago continued, taking a step closer to her. "But I need you to promise that from now on, there will be no more secrets between us. If we're going to build something together, it has to be based on truth." She embraced him, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. "I promise. I won't hide anything from you anymore." In the days that followed, Lorena and Tiago began to plan a new life, far from the excesses of the past. She still kept her fortune secure, but now she understood that money didn't have to define who she was. Tiago helped her see that the simplicity she had experienced in that small town was what truly fulfilled her. It wasn't the luxuries or power that would bring happiness, but the genuine connections she had built. Together, they decided to stay in the town where it all began. Lorena no longer needed to run away or pretend to be someone she wasn't. She was free to live as she wished, without the burdens of her old life. Tiago, by her side, supported her in every decision, and they began to dream of a more peaceful and meaningful life. One morning, while walking along the beach, Tiago suddenly stopped and looked out at the horizon. "You know, I've never asked you, what do you really want for the future?" Lorena smiled, feeling the gentle wind on her face. For the first time in years, she knew exactly what she wanted. "I want this. I want to be with you here where everything is simple and true, where we can build something together, away from lies and selfish interests. I don't want to go back to the life I had before. This is now a choice, and it's the best I could make." Tiago smiled and took her hand. "Then we're in agreement. Let's live our truth with no more masks." That choice, to maintain a simple life, was Lorena's redemption. She had finally found the peace she had long sought. It wasn't about what she had, but about who she was and with whom she chose to be. The love Tiago offered didn't depend on her fortune, and for the first time in her life, she felt that the emptiness that had pursued her had been filled. And so Lorena, or rather Laura, as many still knew her, continued her life alongside the man who loved her completely. Together they built a love story based on honesty, simplicity, and above all, mutual respect. The life she now led was a result of choices made with her heart, free from the burdens of the past and the pressures of society. And in the end, she knew that despite having everything materially, what mattered most were the genuine connections she had built. As the sun set on the horizon, casting golden and orange hues across the sky, Lorena looked at Tiago, and with a sincere smile, realized that she was finally exactly where she was meant to be. And so the story of Lorena, now Laura, teaches us a valuable lesson about what truly matters in life. Amid the glow of luxury and the superficiality of relationships, she found true happiness in simplicity, genuine love, and authentic connections. Through her choices, Lorena shows us that the most important thing is not what we have, but who we are and with whom we choose to share our journey. If you were moved by Lorena's journey and learned something about true happiness, don't forget to give this video a like and share it. Comment below about which part of the story touched your heart, and if you've ever been in a similar situation. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. Thank you for watching and see you next time.